Well, I teased it in yesterday's episode. It's finally time. We have to have the conversation around Davis Schneider.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As always, I'm Braden Iwasko. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5Iwasko, Carter First 2, and Instagram, TikTok, at Locked On Blue Jays as well. I keep saying this. If you're new to YouTube or you're listening anywhere else, make sure you go and you drop a subscription on the YouTube channel. It'll keep you guys up to date with lives whenever we go live, shorts, videos, podcasts, everything that comes along with it. It's sort of like the hub for our channel. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really does help us out. It's free. You might as well do it. As well, Discord link is in the description. So if you guys want to chat Blue Jays with us whenever, hit us up on the Discord. As well, we're still taking donations for Movember through the Movember site. So you can click that link in the description as well. We will do sort of like a Movember wrap up at the end of, November. So we'll get into, we'll do something on that as well. But it is time. We got to talk about Babe Schneider because, man, it has been a roller coaster. I got the jerseys hanging behind me that I haven't put on in a couple weeks. And I don't know, man. It really, this episode, I knew it was coming. We've wanted to have him on the show. It didn't quite work out with, I think, the sort of craziness that was the end of last year. Most likely, I would assume a little bit of, not wanting to be out there in the media at the moment. I don't know, man. This is going to be a tough episode. He was like one of my favorite guys that I rooted for, but it's a conversation that definitely needs to be had.
Yeah, before we get into it, would you say Davis Schneider's up there with you with Josh Donaldson? Like, is he your favorite player on the Jays since Donaldson? Like, what kind of waters are we charting into here?
So Donaldson above and beyond will be, and probably anybody will never catch him, is my number one all time. I said Freddie Freeman is still my second favorite player of all time. Since I was a kid, just growing up, watching him playing video games, whatever. He's always been number two. And probably, I love Vlad, don't get me wrong. He's up there. But Davis was just sort of came into it. I jumped on the hype train. I loved him. He was so much fun to watch. Just a guy that was coming in, doing things that we have never seen done before. So sort of, yeah, I liked him a ton. It's just, it's hard after only 2 seasons for me to really quantify sort of where he would rank in, my all-time favorite baseball players. Maybe as like, maybe 10 years down the line, it'll be like, who's your favorite baseball player that like played 4 seasons? And it'll be like, oh, Davis Schneider.
Yeah, we got to hope that Davis Schneider isn't destined for a better career than that. Hopefully not just 4 seasons in the MLB. But yeah, it's tough to formulate opinions on this guy when you said 2 seasons. It's more likely been like a season and a third because this guy came to the MLB in 2023 in August. And before that, like when you look at the start of the 2023 season, I want to say 99.9% of Toronto Blue Jays fans and honestly MLB fans everywhere had no idea who this guy was. Was not a guy you saw in any prospect rankings, not a guy that you saw that could be progressing through the minor leagues at any time. And Davis Schneider's entire career has just been a grind. He's worked for everything that he's gotten, and that's why he is so lovable. Burst on the scene, obviously, in 2023 against the Boston Red Sox. I'll just quickly go over that stat line. 9 for 13 in that series, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs. It's pretty good from a guy that you didn't really expect to do anything on the MLB team in 2023. And just, setting multiple records. My favorite record that he has is he had the highest OPS, which is 1,315 of any player in the modern era of MLB history throughout the first 25 games of his career. This guy was absolutely ridiculous. I guess we should lead off with he's 21 on our prospect rankings, or just Toronto Blue Jays rankings, I should say, not prospect rankings. So we haven't gotten one of these episodes in for a while with all like the stuff coming out. Obviously, Juan Soto, we had Max Fried stuff, we had Vladimir Guerrero trade rumors. We've had so many different things. We put off this episode for a little bit. So Davis Schneider comes in as our 21 21st, right? I almost said 21st, 21st rated player on the Toronto Blue Jays. Coming in 2023 was unbelievable in his tenure with the Toronto Blue Jays during then. Looked like the second coming of Christ, honestly, in that short time span. But then ended September, had 9 straight games where he did not have hits. So a little bit of an up and down season for David Schneider back in 2023. In 35 games, though, he had 32 hits, /276 with a 404 on base, a 603 slugging for an OPS of 1,008 in his first season, had 8 home runs, 20 RBIs. Looked like the Toronto Blue Jays found a diamond in the rough with David Schneider. But then we go into 2024, and I'll kind of let you take the floor here.
Yeah, Carter, this one was tough because he had such an immaculate or, very good start to the season. And then it just went off the absolute cliff, Carter. I'm just going to go over his sort of season in entirety here, a little bit of a comparison back to 2023. But in the season as a whole, he posted a 0 WAR, not 0.01, not 0.1, not -2, 0. 135 games played. He had 454 plate appearances, put up 48 runs, 76 hits, 19 doubles, a triple, 13 home runs, 46 RBIs. He stole 6 bags, 47 walks, 144 strikeouts, with a batting average of 191, an on-base percentage of 282, a slugging of 343, and an OPS of 625. Now, Carter, a couple things that I wanted to talk about here, just, as we're talking, Babe, and is a little bit of the comparison here. I've got some numbers pulled up. He played 35 games in 2023, played 135 games in 2024, 100-game difference. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting, okay? So when we go to home runs, he had only 5 more home runs in 100 more games. He had only 26 more RBIs in 100 more games. He had 5 more stolen bags. I don't think Davis is necessarily a guy that's going to steal you a ton of bags. It's just, I don't know, the comparison of those numbers, Carter, specifically shows you what kind of season he had. There was a lot of the time that David Schneider wasn't doing much of anything. And that's a problem. A lovable guy. Every time, Carter, that when we were out in Toronto and, we were talking to some fans, it was on the street, we were chatting to some of them in the stands. Some people that watch the podcast came up to us and were talking to us about it, just how much they love David Schneider. And I think the fan base does have a lot of that for him, but it gets to a point where you have to understand the situation you're in. And as a fan, you want to see your team win. And when a guy is going out there and not doing much as you love them, it's hard to watch. And you start to get that little bit of, why is he here? And even for me, the attitude was a little bit of that was, maybe should he go to AAA? I think it would help him. And it just never happened. And then it got so late into the season where it wasn't an option. They needed him up there because they didn't have very many guys. Just a tough sort of year for him. And it's going to be very interesting to see how he bounces back.
Well, and that's the good thing about David Schneider is that he does have so little MLB experience. That's usually not a positive, but you can turn things around very quickly. You can turn around these season stats, things like that. This could just be one of those seasons that David Schneider was kind of figuring himself out at the MLB level, because when this guy came into the league, it was like an epidemic. Like, Toronto Blue Jays fans loved him everywhere. It was Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and then maybe Bichette, and then it was David Schneider. You had people wearing mustaches to the games in August for the Toronto Blue Jays. Babe Schneider, obviously the nicknames, all the stuff that came like that. David Schneider couldn't walk around Toronto without being recognized. He was that big of a figure in Toronto at that time. And then things just, it kind of didn't go his way. It was just a lot of players' MLB careers go. It's not necessarily this drastic of a drop-off, but who would have thought David Schneider wasn't going to hit 650 and average, be on pace for 150 home runs in the season? It obviously was never going to happen. We said he was very good at the start of the season, and in April and May, I do have his slash lines here. So in April, he slashed 262 with a 348 on base, 426 slugging for a 774 OPS. That's what David Schneider's doing for your team. I think you're going to love that. Then in May, had a 233 average, not exactly what you want, but again, David Schneider's a guy that's going to hit doubles. He's going to hit home runs, not necessarily the prototypical single hitter. Had an OPS of 832 in May with a 355 on base and 477 slugging. And then that's when things sort of fell apart. When you look at 2023, Davis Schneider was one of the hottest players in all of baseball. And during that season, we were talking about the mismanagement of Davis Schneider. You had one of the hottest players in baseball, and he had a 2 home run game. And then the next day you'd find him on the bench. And it made literally no sense. At that point, we were calling for John Schneider's head because you looked at the product on the field. You could tell that this guy was one of the best players on the field, and you weren't playing consistently. And that kind of hurt Davis Schneider in 2023, but he did get the opportunity through, especially the first part of 2024, to be an everyday player. Looked good at the start, but then the negatives, the scouting reports got to teams. They figured out what he was good at, what he wasn't good at. And we said on this podcast so many times last season, it was the high fastball. This guy looked absolutely lost at the plate when he was throwing a high fastball, just could not catch up to it, had some timing issues. I think it was always in the back of his head. He knew pitchers were going to go back to that pitch, was getting better at fouling it off, but then they throw him an off-speed pitch and the timing would be all out of whack. He was so focused on that high fastball, couldn't really get anything else together. And when you look at Davis Schneider, when you look at his games played, it's pretty much one full season in the MLB. So there are opportunities here for him to go through this offseason, go through spring training, and work his way back up to what we've seen in the MLB, even if that is even a 250 average hitter. If he can have around a 700 OPS, I think that's something that Toronto Blue Jays fans are going to be okay with when we're looking at Davis Schneider.
Yeah, exactly. A super utility guy, right? A guy that can literally almost play any position. Probably if you threw him behind the dish, you would probably figure it out. He was just one of those guys. And I think that's what, started the love for this guy. You'd see him at second, you'd see him at 3, you'd see him in left field, you'd see him everywhere. And that was a great component to all of that. And Carter, you know what? You're right. At the end of the day, he has no service time. I go back to the mismanagement part of this, Carter. And I think that's, at the end of the day, again, not to make excuses for him, but it's part of what sort of, I think, led to the downfall in 2023. In that season, you could have played Davis Schneider every day and really capitalized on what he was doing. And then teams maybe would have gotten to him quicker. He would have had an offseason to then figure everything out and then maybe come back into 2024 a little bit better. But that he wasn't giving that opportunity. He goes into 2024 and the teams that now figure him out. And there isn't that time to work things out as an off season. He's trying to do it mid-season when they're playing every day. It just wasn't going. It wasn't a recipe for success for Davis Schneider this season. So I am looking for him as a bounce back candidate. Maybe not my biggest bounce back candidate, but one of them to have a better season going into 2025. I don't think it's going to be absolutely groundbreaking. I don't think he's going to be Babe Ruth or Shohei Ohtani, but I think it's going to be better. And that's what I'm hoping for, because like I said, I think the love that Toronto Blue Jays fans have for Davis Schneider is out there. It's great. And you can feel it in the ballpark, when he comes up to bat. I remember when we were out there and he was still playing well. And the stroke starts playing and everybody gets into it because they know Babe Schneider's walking up to the dish. So, it's a fun time. When Babe Schneider's good at baseball, it's fun. So, again, have to wait and see. I want to talk more about him and just sort of where, what he's looking at in terms of 2025. Who is he competing against? What is his role going to be with this team? We'll talk about all that, but Carter, we do got to take a quick break. So we'll do that now and be right back. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You guys all know I talk about it all the time. FanDuel is my favorite site to place my bets. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. I always talk about it, that $150 in bonus bets is pretty much free money. Just make sure you win that first $5 bet, because that's the key to getting that $150 in bonus bets. You'll get started, like I said, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Carter, I guess to kick things off here, segment 2, talking about Babe Schneider, Davis Schneider. Let's rock. What's his sort of role going to be going into 2025?
And again, this is another tough guy to talk about when there's been zero free agency moves made. The one benefit to David Schneider is that he can play left field, he can play second base, he can play a bunch of different positions in the infield. You could probably put him at shortstop if you want to do that. Not necessarily. His primary position is second base, but we saw him almost exclusively as an outfielder in 2024. Again, we're on this train that the Toronto Blue Jays are going to bring in a left fielder at absolute minimum and then probably address either third base or second base. So we're kind of running under the impression that there's going to be at least 2 free agency signings for positional players. So where does that leave David Schneider? On our rankings, we kind of have him sandwiched right in the middle here. Like for me, I am big on Orelvis Martinez, so I kind of swung that on Braden here with our rankings. We got to have him a little bit higher. We have Will Wagner a little bit higher, but then we have guys like Aston Barger, Leo Jimenez, guys like this under him. So he's kind of smacked in the middle of this fringe MLB players that we have on the Toronto Blue Jays. So when we talk about that, we talk about trade pieces. We talk about is Aston Barger going to be a trade piece? Is Leo Jimenez going to be a trade piece? Will Wagner, Joey Loperfido, these type of guys. Do you have David Schneider? I guess we'll start here. Do you have David Schneider as being a possible trade piece in one of these upcoming trades that we hope the Toronto Blue Jays are going to make this offseason?
It could be. Yeah, I think it's in the question. I look at a guy like Addison Barger a little bit more for a trade piece than I do necessarily David Schneider, but I think if teams are wanting them and the Blue Jays, really want to make that move, I could see them doing it. I think that, I don't think you gave David Schneider enough of a look necessarily to, want to send him away. And because I think you've seen the potential that he carries, which might be a little bit more than Addison Barger. So maybe that's a reason why they try to keep David Schneider as what would look like so far a bench option. Or that utility guy that maybe throws in for second base, maybe plays a little bit of DH here and there. But yeah, I could definitely see it being a possibility for a trade for sure.
See, I'm at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I don't think Davis was going to be traded whatsoever unless he is a throw-in because of how he ended 2024. I don't think a lot of teams are going to be too swung by David Schneider. I don't think at this point he carries a lot of value when he hit like 150 down the stretch.
I agree. I agree. I think it would be a throw-in option for sure. Like, I don't think he's the main piece of that trade. And I think that that's why I lean to him, not the Blue Jays not wanting to trade him, because I think the value comparison to what he could bring you, the difference is so massive. You've seen the ceiling for David Schneider, so you know what there is. Whereas Addison Barger, I think, has been in that more mushy middle where it gives him a little bit more leverage in a trade, but maybe doesn't have that high of ceiling. So I think Addison Barger for sure is more likely, but I definitely could see it as a throw-in option, 100%.
Yeah, Addison Barger has more of those prototypical attributes that you can associate with like the MLB starters. You look at the arm strength, you look at just the raw power that Addison Barger has. When you look at David Schneider, I don't think he does anything exceptionally, but he does a lot of good, like things good. He's not doing anything that's like unbelievable like Addison Barger. You see the power, you see the arm strength, things like that, where it's like, holy cow, this is absolutely crazy to watch. Whereas David Schneider, he does the little things right, and he's more of that average player, MLB player, you could say. For me, with David Schneider, I don't really see him turning out to being this huge superstar like the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. numbers. He's more going to be an MLB average hitter, whereas Addison Barger is more of a boomer bust candidate. And David Schneider, he would just be selling at his lowest point. It's the same argument I made with Bichette after what he did in 2024. I don't think you're going to be able to get a lot for David Schneider. So for me, he's not going to be in a trade piece, so that means he's going to be with the Toronto Blue Jays, whether that's the minor league club, whether that is the major league club as well. With David Schneider, it's going to come down to the strikeouts and the whiffs. This guy has a very good eye. That's not up for debate whatsoever. Just looking at his Savant page, 77th in walk rate, and that was with him chasing a little bit down the stretch as well. It's going to come down to how he adjusts to how pitchers are throwing against him, how he's adjusting to the high fastball, how he's adjusting to the low breaking pitches, how he's going to adjust to that inside fastball as well. He's getting thrown. Because right now he's in the 4th percentile in K percentage at 31.7. That's a very high K rate. You can't really have that as an everyday player in your MLB lineup. And the whiff rate is in the 15th percentile at 30.6 as well. So those are the underlying numbers for me. That is the biggest cause of concern for David Schneider. You can't be striking out that much and expect to be on the MLB roster. So this is really going to come down to the free agency signings. But right now, you look at the Toronto Blue Jays, I feel like they're very high on Will Wagner. I know you're very high on Will Wagner. How can you not be high on Will Wagner after what he did in that small sample size? So I think right now, if you were going to say, oh, who's going to play on the Toronto Blue Jays if the season started tomorrow, I think you probably have Will Wagner ahead of Davis Schneider. You might have Aston Barger ahead of Davis Schneider. I think Davis Schneider right now is on the outside looking in. He kind of did that to himself in a little bit of a sense, but I'm not saying that he does not have the opportunity to have a very good offseason, very good spring training, and kind of go into that bench role that we could see for Davis Schneider in 2025. So it's really going to be up to him. If this guy wants it, which obviously he does. He's been underappreciated his entire career, has not gotten anything given to him for free whatsoever. He's worked for everything that he's gotten. And a guy that's has never been the highest rated prospect whatsoever. So he's just battling against the odds once again. And who am I to say that Davis Schneider is not going to overcome for the millionth time in his career?
No, I agree with you, dude. You know what? I don't necessarily, sorry, I should say I 100% agree with you. In that side of things, absolutely. I think Davis Schneider can work his butt off and be a very solid player here for this team. But I disagree with you in the fact I think he, right now, holds down a bench spot for this team. I think they would much rather send Addison Barger down to AAA, have him work out more things, see what he can come up with, and start with Davis on the bench, seeing what he can do. I don't necessarily think that that's great for Davis Schneider and his, ability to make a comeback. But I think that that's what the Blue Jays are probably more so looking to do. I 100% agree. If the season started tomorrow, Will Wagner's my second baseman. I loved what that kid has shown, and I think he could be very, very solid. But Davis Schneider, I think there's a couple components that go into this with Davis Schneider. For one, the fans already know him. He's going to sell stuff. If it's merchandise, whatever, Davis Schneider stuff will always sell. Even last year when we went, Carter, there were people walking around with Schneider jerseys. They're wearing the mustaches, whatever it is. He'll sell stuff. He's not necessarily people are 100% just coming to see him. I don't want to make that a thing. But in this respect of he will sell stuff. He's a little bit of a novelty, a guy with such, started his career so insane that people are going to have a soft spot for him still. And he is that sort of lovable face, face to the team right now where people look at him and they're like, wow, this guy worked up from being, drafted in the 28th round or whatever. And, it was sort of crazy. So in saying that, that's a component to it. And then the other component is I think you've, again, seen his ceiling, see what he can be. And has he worked through some of that stuff in the offseason? We'll have to wait and see. And I think that's where the Blue Jays are at with this too. If they can see a good spring training out of him or a pretty decent spring training out of him, I think there's no question that Davis Schneider will be a bench spot 1,000%.
I think the argument that people are going to say is that I think we're kind of looking at this very positively. I think we're always going to do that. I'm never going to say anyone on the Toronto Blue Jays, unless maybe George Springer, is going to have a bad season upcoming, especially with these young players. I'm not going to prey on their downfalls. But with how Davis Schneider ended the season, the recency bias there, you look at the sample size, you could probably argue that Davis Schneider was worse for more of his career. Again, very small sample size than he was good. So I think the other argument is going to be, are these strikeout problems going to be an issue? Are these whiff problems going to be an issue? Is he never going to catch up to that high fastball? And are we seeing what Davis Schneider really is at the MLB in this second half of the season rather than at the start?
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to make this seem like we don't see the problems here. Right? Like, obviously, you actually hit the nail on the head. Is this the Davis Schneider that we will be getting for the remainder of his career? Is this what he always was and just went on a hot streak? That's a possibility, 100%. It's sort of what he wants to, or what he can do with it. I just think we have not seen enough to really make a full judgment yet. I think if he comes into next year and really, again, struggles, I don't know where we go from here with Davis Schneider. I think it really is a little bit of a short leash with him. And I hate to say that, but you got to prove it, right? And I think he did that, but he came back down to earth. And now it's again, baseball's a tough game. You always have to prove and work and battle for a spot, especially if you're one of those, middle tier fighting for a spot guys. You got to work your butt off to make sure that you have a spot on the team. And that's 100% what we're going to see out of Davis Schneider.
It just kind of runs with the theme that we've had with this Toronto Blue Jays offseason, and it's the uncertainty. You don't really know what you're going to get from Davis Schneider. It's going to be interesting to see how he does take this offseason. It's all really going to come down to spring training. And again, with free agency, he's going to be battling against the guys like Orelvis Martinez, against the Will Wagners, against maybe the Leo Jimenez is a weird thing to say. But again, not as much with Leo Jimenez. But last thing I'll kind of think out here is, again, we're under the impression, say they sign a left fielder and a second baseman, for example. where does Davis Schneider fit into this equation? Would you want him as a bench bat? Like you said, it's not going to benefit Davis Schneider if he's coming off the bench. Are they rather going to take a chance on a guy like Orelvis Martinez, who, again, you want in your major league club? He's been a top prospect on your team for a very long time. Should have been playing last season, but obviously we know how that turned out. Then Will Wagner, just you see the upside with some of these guys, and just with recently how they've been playing, they might be more inclined to go with the Will Wagners, the Joey Loperfidos, the new faces among the club rather than the old faces.
It's going to be interesting for sure. And that's going to be the question that we're going to have to watch out for through spring training. See who brings it, see who doesn't. See what this club is looking like they want to do. How many games each of them get in spring training. Oh, man, I don't know. It's going to, there's a lot going on in Blue Jays land because you keep talking about the uncertainty with this team. And that's what it keeps, bringing me back to is I don't know. We're hearing rumors about this, rumors about that. And it's sort of, thank God that we spend so much time covering this team, because at the end of the day, is if you're an average Blue Jays fan, I have no idea how in the world you know what's going on. Because I can tell you, we, just looking at some of our commenters and some guys who, or people that watch our podcast, there's some hardcore fans here. And we appreciate that. I wonder from an average fan perspective, if you have a hot clue of what's going on with this team right now.
I'd love to see the takes on Davis Schneider too, because I feel like it's either overwhelmingly positive or you're like, get this guy away from our baseball field. I do not want this guy even touching the turf on the Rogers Center. So that's going to be interesting to see how this does work out. So yeah, leave your takes on Davis Schneider, comments, how you think his season is going to pan out. Is he even going to be with the MLB club in 2025? Last thing before we do head out for this segment break is just the overall grade for Davis Schneider in 2024. Expectation had to have been a lot higher than obviously the result, so I can't expect a lot of good grades here, but I'm going to let you start this one
off. Is there a D minus? I don't know if that's a thing.
I'll let you use D minus, but I think it goes from D to F normally, but I'll let you use D minus for our ranking system here.
I don't want to give him an F. Expectations were definitely higher. I didn't think he was going to go in and continue on the pace that he was from the season prior. But I expected him to be better than he was for sure. I think everybody did. That's upsetting. But yeah, if I'm looking at this realistically, it's got to be a D minus. That's what it's got to be.
Not going to go with it. Hey, you can't get yourself to say it. I'm going to say it because I unfortunately, just from what I saw over the 2024 season, again, April and May seemed like it was 500 years ago. So I got to go with an F. It just did not look good down the stretch on serious at-bats, obviously, in August and September. Again, I'm not one to necessarily prey on the downfall of our players unless you're throwing George Springer out in the leadoff spot. But when Davis Schneider was coming up to the plate in August and September, it was almost looked like a guaranteed strikeout a lot of the time, just with the swings he was taking, the balls he was swinging at, and just the overall confidence with Davis Schneider in the box. And I think that's going to be a massive thing this offseason is Davis Schneider needs to get his confidence back. You could tell when he was in the dugout, honestly, on the field as well, did not look like his confident self that he did in 2023. So a lot of uncertainty here. Again, I'm going to hope that Davis Schneider goes and he hits 300 next season and hits 40 home runs and has a competition with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for the Toronto Blue Jays MVP. How likely is that? I guess we're going to have to find out, but we do have some more things that we do want to talk about. There's one of the Toronto Blue Jays, ex-Toronto Blue Jays, has been signed. So we're going to jump right into that after this short break.
Welcome back. Segment 3. I know we went a little bit long. You know how we do when we start talking about Davis Schneider. I get a little long-winded, then Carter probably, it brings me back down to earth a little bit. It's just how it goes because, I am a fan and I'm not going to sit here and say, that I'm not, but I'm also going to look at things pretty realistic. I think at the end of the day, I understand baseball as much as I love guys and like watching them play. At the end of the day, when we're on this podcast, we want to bring you guys up-to-date information. Some pretty standard takes. Usually we don't throw out anything too crazy. Once in a while it gets a little out there, but not too often. And for this episode, I made sure I sort of dialed in my thoughts, my feelings, and tried to come at it, sort of as a neutral towards Davis Schneider. And I think that's how it came out. But Carter, in saying that, let's talk about a guy, ex-Blue Jay, that has just signed a pretty nice little deal for himself.
Yeah, I think it was a great move by both sides of this one. The Los Angeles Angels make a splash in free agency and they sign our king, Yusei Kikuchi, 3 years, $63 million deal. I believe that's the exact same as Chris Bassitt, $21 million per year. We were talking about this a little bit off camera. We tried to save the majority of it for on camera, but we both were under the first impression of it's a great deal by the Angels. This next season, I think it's going to be a bargain for Yusei Kikuchi. I expect him to build on what he has built on for the last 2 seasons. I think the third year is where you might start to see a little bit of a fall off here, but it's also the Los Angeles Angels. So Yusei Kikuchi, I mean, good for him. He's living in LA now. The California dream, probably the wrong California team. There's multiple out there. Pick the Los Angeles Angels, so that's a little bit interesting there. But overall, for the lifestyle and Yusei Kikuchi, it's going to be pretty good for him living it up in Cali.
Yeah, man. Nice move from him. Congratulations. You know what? Just a little bit of a quick thing I have to throw in here. We will do a Juan Soto update on this as well, but it just came in. 5 teams have put in offers for Juan Soto: the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, and of course your Toronto Blue Jays. So just throwing that out there, put that in the back of your mind. It came out when you guys are watching this, came out yesterday night. So make sure that you guys, we'll keep you up to date with all that stuff going on. We will do another Juan Soto update. It seems like things are starting to progress. Sorry, I didn't want to take too much time away from Kikuchi there, but just to throw that in as it just came, through my little contact page there. So in saying that, Carter, besides that, yes, Kikuchi. Great deal for him. I love the Angels doing this. I think this is a great move from them. I'm so happy for Kikuchi. Like I said, all ex-Blue Jays I want to do well as long as they're not with the Yankees. So congratulations to Kikuchi. This is a very nice deal.
Yeah, I'm saying that. I think if the Toronto Blue Jays would have signed this contract, I wouldn't have loved it for them. I don't know. You see what happened with Kikuchi. He was very good with the Toronto Blue Jays, but it's just sort of the same story and dance. If you get all these old faces returning to the Toronto Blue Jays, it kind of just makes you remember the pain and suffering that we had in 2024. I'd rather move on and get as far away from that as possible. But with Kikuchi, yeah, wishing him nothing but the best in LA. We'll see his number maybe in Toronto. That will be an interesting facet to see. If he gets another warm welcome like he did when he was playing for the Houston Astros. But yeah, with Yusei Kikuchi especially, wishing nothing but the best for one of the best Toronto Blue Jays to ever do it.
That's a great end of the episode. As always, let us know what you guys think about all the Davis Schneider talks that we did today. Honestly, anything Blue Jays related, if there's anything you guys want us to specifically cover, make sure you leave it down below in the comment section. We'll try to do like a question of the day or something on some of the messages you guys leave. So make sure you do drop that down below. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in, making us your first listen every day. Go check out Locked On MLB with host Paul Sullivan. Make him your second listen. In saying that, have a great day. We'll be back again tomorrow.